Welcome to the Auburn Medical Group YouTube live stream, the entertaining medical live stream where viewers can ask real-time questions of real medical doctors. And here are our hosts, Dr. Mark Vaughn and Dr. Gwen Vaughn.
This is the show. This is the Auburn Medical Group live stream with, well, I would say Dr. Mark Vaughn and Dr. Gwen Vaughn, but Dr. Gwen Vaughn's not here, so it's just Dr. Mark Vaughn this week. We will get Dr. Gwen back next week. We miss him. He told us last week he wouldn't be here, so I guess it's okay. He can have a little time off now and then. I'm sure you would allow him that. But we are still going to talk about medical topics on the show, and we have a number of them that I've actually put out there both on the chat, which this is a live show, so there's a live chat going on right now, as can be evidenced by Lindsay Antwine writing about the topics that she thought would be interesting. Specifically, she can't choose between the lost keg from a human bite. Actually, it was a leg. I know some people consider themselves the human keg, but in this case, it was a leg. Human bite or the reanimated heart. She chooses both. So we'll try to get to those. We also have other people who are joining our show, like Robert Antonio telling us hello. He's kind of a, I won't say regular, but we recognize his name. Thank you, Robert. We do recognize your name. And Co-Ro, who has been on the chat before. We do see that you're here. Welcome. And of course, Bianca. Bianca is a very special guest, like Lindsay Antwine, because she's on the Patreon. That's important. We'll have to show you how you also can be on Patreon. There it is. So pay attention to that. Also, after the show, there'll be a little link that shows you how to do that. Also, going back to our chat, we have, yes, Bianca, hi, and we have Laura Barzyk also. Oh my goodness, all of our favorites, and Co-Ro is still here raising the hand with the thumbs up. I'm sure that looks different on YouTube. You guys can probably see it in the chat there. I can't because I only have this interface over here. Co-Ro has a great sense of humor with the doctor. I hope you also have a great sense of humor when you're not with me, or with your doctor, as the case may be. So we are going to go ahead and jump right into, well, let's see, Florida Man. So I can bring that up on the computer here so that you also can see what we're talking about. The Florida Man, I love things that start with Florida Man, don't you? So this is looking at the browser here, and you can see the picture on, what's this, New York Post. The New York Post, or nypost.com is the address if you want to look at it, where you can see this story coming from Florida, the Center for Wound Care and Hyperbaric Medicine, with the surgeon there, with the gentleman wearing shorts. Notice he's wearing shorts. So he's the Florida man who had a family member bite his, I believe it was his left thigh. Maybe we can even find some of that if we scroll down the page some here. And well, there's I don't know if that's before or after, but there's this big, and then there's the scar after they took a very large amount of tissue out of this man's thigh. Oh, that sounds awful. They said it was a gray discharge that was pouring out as they were cutting away the necrotic tissue. He had a condition called necrotizing fasciitis. Boy, I'm glad the word came to me while I'm on the show. Necrotizing fasciitis being a condition where you actually have a bacteria eating away at your tissue. They call it flesh-eating bacteria. And you can get it from a number of places. He got it from a human bite. We treat all animal bites the same. All animal bites, especially mammals, have the potential to have bacteria that can cause problems such as this. And so when I first started residency, there was a recommendation that any animal bite, whether it be human or your cat or your dog, be treated immediately with antibiotics. And there's a specific antibiotics that's recommended to cover things that are in animals' mouths, like Pasteurella multicida and some other ones that you really want a specific antibiotic, not just your regular penicillin by itself, to be able to address this infection that could happen and could happen quick and can spread. And then the recommendations changed as time went on, and by the end of residency, it had already changed to, well, don't automatically use antibiotics in every single bite wound, but consider it still consider it kind of the standard of care for bites in the extremities, especially those like cat bites with those fangs getting in and able to go all the way down to the bone. I mean, they're just needles going in the skin, and then they can cause very serious infections that can spread through the little capsule there that's around the tendons, the flexor and extensor tendons. Those can be really bad, and they can spread very quickly. And so a lot of times when we see an infection that started already, somebody didn't get medical attention after they had their bite, and then they come in days later when their hand is super painful, hurts just to move their finger. They can't even move their finger. You move it for them, and they can't even stand it. It's so painful, and the swelling is already spreading up, even going up toward the arm. We just have to send them to the emergency department to get attention by an orthopedic surgeon at that point with IV antibiotics and possible debridement in the operating room, because these things spread fast and they're ugly. Now, a bite on the cheek. That was the other recommendation too, that you not even put sutures in for bite wounds, because the suture material provides a place for bacteria that's in the wound to hang out, essentially, to keep from being removed. And it can turn into an infection that grows later. You can also have problems with, if you close the wound, that the bacteria or an infection can't drain, and so it turns into an abscess or spreads through the tissue. So you want to not sew it close. But then they said, if it's on the face, super good circulation, maybe you don't have to automatically put the person on antibiotics. And if it's on the face, cosmetically sensitive, maybe you want to just tack the pieces together so that you get a better cosmetic result than if you didn't sew it together. So always changing, trying to get the best care for patients as we research different ways of doing things and have different articles come out. There may be even some more since I last looked at the literature that says something even different from that. So let's get back to our comments and questions. Let's see, on the chat here, we'll jump back to, and this is what happens when you have the one-man show here doing it all. Oh my goodness, lots of comments here. We'll jump into, let's see what Lindsay says, of course, because she says, fun fact, I worked with a guy once who was a huge jerk that got on my nerves so much one day I told him to bite. Lindsay? Really? So he actually bit me on the skin and left a bruise. Okay, thankfully no break of skin there. But wow. You might want to work in a different environment. And then we also have a conversation going on about that amongst you can see it if you're on the chat, of course. And then Bianca comes in with a comment about, I once punched my stepson in the mouth and his tooth bit me and 2 of my fingers swelled. I had to have antibiotics. Interesting. When we see patients who have the classic wound after hitting something, Sometimes they're a little cagey with their answers when it's this kind of situation, and they'll have this wound on their hand that looks like it's not over the knuckle terribly, but then if you flex the fingers, you see that the skin moves, and you can see where it was over the knuckle when they hit somebody in the mouth. That's considered a bite, a human bite. When somebody punches somebody else in the mouth and they get cut right there, we call that a human bite. It's also something that is reportable to the county when somebody gets a human bite, even if it's from them hitting the other person. And then you have the concern because you can get horrible tracking down into the joint space. Bad thing, really bad if you get a septic joint. So, I'm trying to remember who taught me it. It may have been Dr. Go in my residency in Kansas City. Maybe it was something on television or a movie that really, when you hit someone, the face is bone. It hurts. And it has teeth that cause, horrible infections. Hitting somebody in a softer area also hurts the other person and doesn't injure you. Just a little pointer out there as I give advice I'm not supposed to on how to hit people. Okay, so let's get back to your comments. So Robert Antonio is saying, so for a bite wound, not a broad spectrum antibiotic? Well, that's why I was saying a very specific antibiotic, one that covers things like Pasteurella multicida, because you want to get that and the other organisms that live inside of a mouth covered. And so you would consider it a broad spectrum, but not all broad spectrum cover that. So that's why not just any would work. And then going back to your comments, we have Catherine. I have Kienbach. I don't know what this is. Kienbach disease. I'm not familiar with it. Had to have a bone removed in my hand. It's the bone that you have between the thumb and the wrist. I'm sorry you had to have that removed. Okay. So let's get on to the other topic that, of course, our Patreon member Lindsay Antwine wanted us to cover, and that was, I already forgot, so I'm going to have to go back through the chat and see what it was. Don't tell me, because I'm going to go look anyway. It was the reanimated heart. So if we find the reanimated heart, that was in Kaiser Family Foundation Health News. Let me switch to it here. On their morning briefing. You also can find this online. Study reanimated hearts from deceased donors okay to transplant. Let me tell you what that means and where that's coming from. So the way that they have normally done heart transplants is they wait until the heart stops. I'm sorry, they do not. Scratch that. That's what the difference is. They don't wait for it to stop. They find a patient who is in a situation where, hey, this person is not coming out of it. They still have a beating heart. You know, the classic example would be horrible head injury from a motorcycle crash, something like that. Young, healthy specimen otherwise. You know, this heart is young, maybe even somebody who's athletic, but the injury to the brain is such that there's just nothing going on in the cerebrum. So the thinking, conscious, what we associate with consciousness, and being able to interact meaningfully with the environment, part of the brain. And so they'll reach a point if the family says, yeah, we're okay with transplant or donation or stopping life-sustaining measures, you know, turning off the machine that's keeping the things going so the heart continues to beat. Well, instead of doing that while the heart's still beating, they take it out and, well, it's not beating when they take it out, but they stop it with treatment with cold and then take it to a person who needs a transplant, and they put it in that person and then use electricity to restart it. The reanimated is where, before they harvest the heart from the donor, the heart stops. So this would be where, instead of taking it out, they go ahead and turn off the life support and the heart stops and then take it. And what they found in the study was it really doesn't make a difference as far as the outcomes for the person who receives the transplant. And so now this is actually something that's occurring to a certain extent in transplant centers, and we'll catch on, and it will increase the pool of available hearts for transplant a certain amount, certain percentage. Okay, let's get back to your comments and questions on the live chat, because this is a live program that comes on at 4:30 on Mondays, in case you're watching later. So let's get back to the chat and find. I know there's been a conversation going on since I last left it. All right, we'll come back here. Catherine, now, because of my display, I'm unable to totally read everything on this one. It says another way to write it would be, and that's where I can't read. There's something about a box. I was told it isn't contagious. Thank you for saying my name correctly. Well, yeah, you spelled it correctly, so I pronounced it correctly. Thought that there was something else there. Okay, moving on to the next topic. We have, what else was in the health news over the weekend? We did the Kaiser Foundation, and we did viruses. So which viruses don't really need to be tested? Well, we have this one that's really around right now called Human Metapeumovirus, and that's what this article in CNN Health is about. And it's another example of something that's in the health news where my job is to tell you, don't worry about it. So Human Metapeumovirus is yet another virus that's been around, and when they check specimens from way back before they discovered it, they find, it's been around a long time. We just didn't know what it was, or didn't have a way of identifying it back in the 50s and 60s. And so now we have a name for it. So it used to be before COVID that we would call these things a cold. And it could be some kind of influenza virus. It could be, which now we also call flu. It could be rhinovirus. It could be paramyxovirus. There are lots and lots and lots of different viruses that cause common cold that goes around and people get. And in fact, on average, everybody gets a cold annually. That's average. Not everybody does, but on average, everybody not only gets a cold, but gets more than one. But we don't remember them because there's no reason to remember that you had a cold back in January. And then you had another one before that in October. So we don't remember them. Everybody goes, no, I don't get that many. No, I don't get that many. But then when we go through the records, we find, well, look, you did come in for something. So it's one of those things that's just not memorable enough and doesn't need to be. But there's lots of them. That's why we don't get immunity to all of them, because there are so many different ones. This is just another one of those. Now, it's not that it doesn't hurt anybody. It does. People do die after they catch metapneumovirus and get sick from it and go to the hospital, especially people who are vulnerable because of respiratory problems or immune deficiencies. Same story as with COVID, except COVID was a lot worse when it first came out. Influenza is one of the worst ones, and so that's why we're very aware of it, because it does kill a lot of people. And so these viruses that we're naming right now have vaccines. Human metapneumovirus is not as big of a killer as influenza or COVID either now or was, because it is still killing people, by the way, daily in our country. You just don't hear about it because it's calmed down so much from where it was. And there's so many other things they have in the news. Human metapneumovirus, though, we don't have a specific treatment for it, and it's not as big of a killer. It's not as contagious as the ones that we get excited about. And so that's why it's not really something to know. There is a test for it. It does exist, but its only purpose is really to rule out other things and to let you know, oh, it's human metapneumovirus. We don't have a specific treatment for it. We'll give supportive care like we do for viral infections, unless there is an antiviral, like there is for COVID, like there is for influenza, like there is for herpes, these things that can cause very serious disease, especially in the vulnerable. So that's why I address this as something you don't have to get super excited about or make a big deal out of or need to know about your health. But we'll be in the news because it was a slow news weekend. So what's the next topic that we have here? Let's see, we had, oh yes, okay, this is kind of like with the virus thing here. I'll pull it up for you so you can see what I'm looking at. This is at publications.aap.org. AAP is the American Association of Pediatrics, I believe. If not, the name is very similar to that. And they have this website called Pediatrics where they have reports on things that have been studied. And this is a study right here that was done in an effort to reduce unnecessary respiratory viral testing to promote high-value care, because so much testing, especially right now with all of our viruses that we're testing for, everybody who comes in with upper respiratory symptoms, we're testing them. That's not going to be the case long term. We're going to be able to pull back from that and save the testing for situations where it matters, like influenza is going around and people would benefit from getting an antiviral that we have for influenza. Well, that's still kind of the case for COVID because we have a lot of patients who are vulnerable, especially those over age 65 or with some kind of pre-existing health condition, that to get them Paxlovid will decrease the chance of them getting seriously ill. And it does also for those other people who are over age 50 and don't have those immune compromising conditions. It does reduce the incidence of them having long COVID symptoms. So if you are over 50, even though you're healthy, if you're over 50, it does help for reducing long COVID. Okay, let's go back to your comments and questions, our chat, and see what has been coming in since we've been talking about these articles. So I'm surprised we actually got through all the topics this week. I guess that's what happens when you don't have two doctors talking about it. Oh my goodness, Robert Antonio gave us the super chat. Look at that. Thank you, Robert Antonio. We appreciate you doing that. I'm going to look back here and make sure that we got you appropriately thanked for that. Good. The super chat did occur. So we'll come back to the chat there and we'll see if there are other comments that we need here. Now, Catherine was commenting on how she likes to see the ear cleaning videos, and they are fun to do. We haven't done one just too lately. Dutch Bros for you all. Thank you. Yes, that'll almost get us 2, but thank you. We do we do appreciate that. I actually went without the Dutch today because I didn't have the obligation to get it for Gwen, and I'm trying not to get so many calories. Also, it's kind of nice to avoid the caffeine later, but we'll do it next week because Dr. Gwen will be back, and Robert Antonio, we will use that for it. Thank you. We do appreciate that. So with that, we kind of bring ourselves to the end of the show here. Do remember that if you like having your name on the screen, like Lindsay does and other people at the end of the show, we can certainly make that happen for you through Patreon, if that's your thing. So until next time, it's just me, Dr. Mark Vaughan, telling all of you to stay in good health. And thank you, Robert.
Doctors, thank you for another informative session. Auburn Medical Group is located in Auburn, California, USA. Thank you for participating. Please tell a friend and join us again next week.